y'all, it's Hope here at Crafty Hope and welcome. It is time for the week 32 mixed media prompt project for hashtag Crafty Hope prompts. I'm going to explain that real quick and hopefully get to it. Crafty Hope prompts is a challenge I developed for myself in which I took a list of 156 prompts and I'm altering playing cards. I started in October with the idea that there are 52 cards in a deck and 52 weeks in a year. So I made sure I had enough prompts to have 3 prompts each week. So every Monday I'm drawing 3 prompts and altering my playing card to build up a prompt deck. Both sides of my card are altered. One side is my decorative side that is just pretty and has all the prompts included on it. The other side is my functional side that actually has the prompt words, so that later on I have a full deck of prompt cards that I can pull for inspiration. So in addition to the Monday card, I'm also doing a Saturday project so that I use these 3 prompts as they are in some way outside of just making the card, because my intention later is to maybe pull 3 cards at a time and use a prompt from each of them. That's my idea anyway. You are welcome to play along in this challenge. I know I'm on week 32. It doesn't matter. If these prompts appeal to you, give you an idea, go for it. If you just need some inspiration, you can use the prompts I've pulled on Monday or print out that list. I've got my full list of 156 prompts down below. Print that out and pick a couple prompts. Go for it. Cut them out, pull them like I do, whatever. And if you want to see more videos from this project, I'll have a link at the end for the full playlist. So this is the card that I made for week 32 using the prompts beads, acrylic ink, and distress ink pad. Should be a link up here if you want to go watch that. And it's time for me to do a project. I will tell you, I've labored over this idea for a while. I almost immediately knew with beads, once I did this border here, that I wanted to incorporate beads in some different way. The border is fun, but I wanted to do something else. So I'm going to try something else, but I couldn't decide what I wanted to do for my project. Some projects I do tags. I've done, what else have I done? Art journal pages, junk journal pages, altered coffee cans, canvases, encaustic panels, bookmarks. I think I've done all kinds of stuff that you'll find them in that playlist. But I've labored over this far too long and decided I'm just going to do an art journal page today, y'all. So I have my square dilutions journal off to the side. I will bring that in a minute. For beads, I have got, these are just silver colored beads. I've got, sorry about the dog. I was hoping she wouldn't do that. We've got people going to band practice with my husband here. So these are just, I've got a ton of these, so I decided these would be the perfect beads to use, but they're just silver colored metal beads. I do make jewelry, so I have tons of beads, and that's part of the reason this prompt is on here. So acrylic ink, I have a large collection of Amsterdam, Liquitex. I've got a couple FWs, and then I've got random other acrylic inks, or inks that I don't know what they're made of, but and then distress ink pad. This is my collection of them here. I've got some of the little ones, some of the big ones, and I think I have a couple other colors, my browns and blacks, kind of off to the side. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, and I kind of just want to get in this art journal and play. So I'm going to put this aside and pull out my journal, and we're going to get to it. Let me know if you have any questions.
Oh goodness, y'all. I thought I just recorded all of this audio and apparently it was not recording. So I'm a little frustrated and I'm hoping I can get through this without being wonky. Okay, so as I mentioned, I am using my Square Dilutions journal. It is a larger format than I tend to enjoy working with, I have found. It's good for the challenge. It's good to press me to have that challenge. So I do try to work in it for every now and again. And since it kind of went well with the idea I had, or somewhat, I was like, that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to just work in my art journal. So I really enjoy starting a journal page of any kind with some collage. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using acrylic matte medium and a variety of scraps from my stash and just gluing them down. I recently sorted through, y'all. I did a big, right, especially right around my desk. Went through a lot of things, getting rid of things I knew I wouldn't use. That scrap box, it was included in this. Like, I went through and pulled out scraps that I was like, I will never use this bright orange pink of whatever. Um, because I tend to like to collage down neutrals, browns, whites, blacks. And I did keep some little bits, if you can see there, like blues and blue greens. Anything that's not too crazy and bright and wild. Included, you saw I pulled out just a second ago, were some artist almanac pages. I've got those around, but they just weren't feeling right. You could see I kind of had a palette on here. And so I was like, yep, I'm going to kind of keep to that palette and just use the things that feel right. Now, when I work in this large journal, because it is a larger format than I usually work in, I don't tend to use both pages. I like to bleed over into that left page just a little bit so that it feels like I've done a full spread without actually doing it. And it kind of just like bleeds that page out just a little bit. So I'm making sure I include some of my collage over on that left side of the page as well, just so that, I don't feel like I have to come back later and also do all these left sides because I've already done something on them. It's my little cheat. So, but that's, I've kind of learned what I like and how I like to create, and that I encourage you to kind of do what feels right. I mean, pressing yourself and challenging yourself is a good thing, but if it's uncomfortable for you every time you do it, maybe that's not your thing. Yeah. All right, so once I got all of my collage down, I went ahead and dried it, and then I'm coming in with some Liquitex gesso and a brayer. Now, I love using gesso with a brayer for a couple reasons. For one, it gives a lot of great texture to the page, and it's also like really random. Like the way that the gesso spreads tends to be kind of unpredictable, and I love that. So it adds a bit of surprise to me to how it works. It's great. But the use of the gesso helps integrate all of that collage that I just put down a little bit so it doesn't feel like one thing standing out more. Now it's time to start bringing in some of my prompts. So I've got some acrylic ink. What I wanted, I don't know why, but something was telling me I needed some turquoise colored ink, and I don't actually have any turquoise colored acrylic ink. So I remembered a tutorial from Iris of Iris Impressions Art. That's Iris Fritchie Cousins, I believe is her name, where she showed how if you use some blue, a little yellow, and a little white and mix that together, it will make turquoise. So I was like, you know what? I don't have to use the acrylic inks the exact way they come out of a bottle. I can make my own. Now, I don't tend to do a whole lot of color mixing, y'all. That's not usually my jam. But the acrylic inks, when I first bought them years and years ago, I just bought what I thought I might want, and they're not. They're not the colors I enjoy using, and there's nothing saying I can't make them into something I want. So I did color mixing, and I came up with this amazing color. So the colors I used, they were Liquitex acrylic inks in cerulean blue, cadmium yellow light, and titanium white. I may not have that completely right. I'll have them below. These are the Liquitex acrylic inks. So I think it's beautiful. I added some water. As you see, moved it around on the page just to get some color down. It's random. I didn't cover every inch. I like a bit of white space in my art journaling, so I made sure I kept it. And now I am bringing in another acrylic ink. This is Amsterdam acrylic ink in yellow ochre. And I love a good yellow ochre. So I have put it into my palette. I've grabbed my fan brush and I'm going to splatter it on top. Now I am using the acrylic inks first on my page before I use the distress products because they are permanent. Once they are dry, they will not move around again on my page. Whereas the distress products, any water, any ink, anything I add on top of them will move. And I want it to move how I want it to move. And after that, I want it done. So for some reason, I was seeing large letters. I've been seeing it for days. I didn't know how I was going to use it, but in my head, I kept saying, oh, I want to put some big blocky letters on something. Not letters, numbers, y'all. I wanted to put some big blocky numbers on something. So I found the largest stamp pad I had of numbers, which is this, I don't even know where they came from, and put them on a distress. I put them on an acrylic block, and I've got my distress ink pad in black soot. And I am just going to move these around on the page. Now I just grabbed some numbers that have different shapes. I got a 2, 4, 2, 6, 4, 9. And I'm turning them in different directions, upside down, sideways, whatever, just getting them on the page. Like I said, I wanted some blocky numbers. So I'm going to get those down. This is, 2 of my whatchamacallit prompts so far. So I've got Distress Ink Pad, I've got my acrylic ink. I am happy right now because I've got those numbers I've been seeing in my head for days on here. So I'm going to clean up real quick, put my numbers up. I'm upset because I've lost the 0 to that set of numbers. I'm going to have to go searching through my stamp pads to find that 0. Okay, so I've got a wet paintbrush now, and we're going to activate the magic of a distress ink, and that is to blend out these inks. They act like they're water reactive, so if you hit them with a paintbrush, they are going to move, and I love that, y'all. This, as you can see, I am just hitting the sides of the numbers. I don't want to blur out the fact that they are numbers completely. So I'm just hitting the edges of them, getting them wet, and then with the ink that is on my paintbrush, I'm doing a little bit of splatter. Now that adds some of the ink back onto the page, but it also puts water splatters on those numbers, which is great because the distress inks will react to that as well, to that water that's on them. So I'm going to go through all these, and I think I'm going to hit a couple more, but then I start to dry it here in a second. I think I'm going to hit 1 or 2 more. I'm going to start to dry it, and as I dry it, I realize how much water I got on that page, so I will stand my journal up and down and let some of that water run and pull that ink down with it. So I'm going to bang down my journal and let gravity kind of do its thing and drip. And I have dried that with these beautiful, y'all, I love this. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to bring ink pad in a little bit more with some of my hand carved stamps. Now, most of these are carved from erasers that I get from the Dollar Tree. I do have a tutorial on that I'll put in the upper right. But if you're new to carving stamps, I do recommend you get some of the Speedy Carve. It's easier to carve than erasers. I will promise you that. I am just thrifty. So what I wanted was a circle, and I could not find a simple circle stamp. I guess I need to carve one, and instead I decided on this spiral one and some picked raspberry distress ink. And I picked this color because I knew it would stand out on the turquoise, as well as add a pop of color to it, and it's fine. Pink's not usually my thing, but it works on here. Again, I wish I had circles instead of spirals, but this is background. It's not a big deal. And once again, I am going to activate that distress ink with some water. Now, again, I am just hitting the edges of this, kind of this is one of my favorite things to do, y'all. If you've seen some of my other videos where I use distress inks and oxides, I love this technique. It just pulls the edges of these stamps into the page and kind of blurs them, and it kind of makes their insides stand out a little bit more. It's super fun. I love it. I could do that all day long, I think. So I'm going to dry it, and it is time to bring my beads in. So my idea was to punch or cut a hole in my page. This is part of the reason I used the dilutions journal, is the thickness of those mixed media pages. I knew would be good for punching and holding up for whatever I punched in there. Now, if you don't have a punch, you can tear it or use a X-Acto knife to cut a different shape, but I knew for this, punching a hole was going to be the easiest. From there, I've got the same piece of cardboard and these pokey tools from the Dollar Tree, and I am poking holes around my circle. I'm basically doing a pattern, kind of, the top and bottom, left and right, and then in between. So 8 holes on here. And I'm going to admit, this is not the shape I had envisioned when I thought about poking these holes and doing this, but I couldn't figure out in my head how to work out the holes to do the pattern I had in mind. So I was like, you know what, doesn't matter. I'm just going to do this. So here are my beads. The first thing I'm doing is checking that the needle I've pulled out will go through those beads, because if it doesn't, meh. And I am also, unlike my card on Monday, I am using some actual beading thread. This is a nylon thread. I can't tell you what it is. I got a bag of different beading threads years ago, I think from a bead store. And so I just grabbed the black one because it went with the black distress ink. And I put my needle on all the way to the center, and then I'm tying several knots up at the end at the end of the threads where they meet. So I'm going to get those. I'm trying to get that as thick as possible because I don't want that knot to pop through the holes that I've poked in my paper. Okay, guys, this is going to get super fiddly. So I'm going in through the back and pulling that up, and my knot didn't come through, and now I'm adding beads. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 5 beads on here, and I'm going to sit and look at it. And then I'm like, no, I'll have these beads fill up that entire space top to bottom. And so I add 2 or 3 more. I think it's 3 more. And fill up the whole space. And then I try to secure them by tying some kind of knot and looping back through, and it gets super fiddly. It is, I'm going to end up cutting ahead here. So I go back in through the top of that hole that's at the bottom, and you can see I'm starting to like wrap the thread around things, and I'm trying to tie knots, and those beads are heavy because they're metal, and I had to stop. And I'm like, I am going to unwrap this, pull this back around so you can see me untangling all of this. And I'm very lucky that it didn't actually tangle. That nice beading cord worked in my favor. And I'm going to go ahead and take 3 beads off. So the 3 beads that I added to fill the space, now those are coming off. And I am going to only have 5 on there so that they move around on that thread. From there, I went into the next hole on the right from that one at the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and add 5 more beads onto my needle and onto my thread. And then I will go into the hole that is directly across from it. And I'm going to kind of continue that pattern, go over one hole, add 5 beads, go diagonally. And like I said, there's only 8 holes, so there's only 4 lines on here of beads. So basically, I guess an asterisk would be the best way to describe it. And this is going to make sure those beads kind of move around and they can go over each other, because I'm not like tying a knot in the middle or anything like that. It's just some beads in a hole on a page. It works out pretty nicely. It's like I said, it's not what I had envisioned. It's not what I wanted. I'll have to think on that some more. There are so many other ways I could have added beads to this, or used beads. I've thought, I could have done some really neat like paper clips, or I could have actually made beads. I could have used my distress ink and my acrylic ink on paper and then rolled paper beads. Could have been a really neat project, but I that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to use beads I already have, because that's kind of the purpose of this project for me, is to use the beads I have, not make more beads. So, okay. So y'all, I flipped to the back here and kind of got that as tight as I could, and you saw tied it on the back. And once it was tied, I trimmed off some of the excess thread, and I am using transparent tape to tape the ends down. Now, I'm not sure why I use transparent tape, but I guess it's so that, because that hole with the beads is see-through, I kind of wanted everything to be see-through, and it was handy that transparent tape stays on my desk. So, all right, so I have all of my prompts now on this page. And now I want to think about a focal. And I don't know. I thought about, my initial idea was to make that beady hole be like a moon and have like somebody, like an image of somebody looking at the moon. But I knew that was just going to be too much. And instead, I decided to pull out my quote chips from Tim Holtz and find a phrase that would work on here. And so I found this one that says creativity takes courage, and I thought that was perfect because it was kind of courageous of me to do something different, to add beads in a way I haven't done before, to get out of my comfort zone. So that was my courageous act there. But I wanted something more with that. I wanted something else to back it. And in my cleaning of my craft room here recently, I found this baggie of stacks of scraps that I had sewn together. These are just stacks of like fabric and paper scraps. I took to my sewing machine one day and just made these little things that I knew could be backers for different sentiments or vocals or whatever. And so I found those and was like, oh my gosh, they've been within inches of me all this time and I forgot I had it. So I'm going to use this. So you saw I went through them, found one that I thought would be perfect on this page. And then I've grabbed my little dauber tool thing with walnut stain distress ink on it. So there's more distress ink, and inked up the edges of that quote chip just so that's not so white and stand out so much. And then I trimmed down the sides of that. It was a little long for this page, and it had some of the seam binding on it that looks just like the seam binding we used here recently for one of the other prompt projects, which I thought was kind of funny. Apparently I have tons of that seam binding. So I'm using Fabri-Tac on the back of the quote chip to glue it to that little stack. I kind of wish I had used my E6000 instead, but I mean, this works fine. It's just the quote chips tend to be kind of heavy. So, and then I use the Fabri-Tac on the back of the stack itself and put that directly on my page. Now, these quote chips are chunky. If you don't want it as chunky, you can peel off that chipboard off the back of it. But because I have the beads in that hole and that's going to be chunky, it didn't matter that this was a little chunky too. But having that lip on the edge made me realize it's about the same height as my beads. And I'm going to glue a couple beads to the top and then 3 at the bottom of this and bring beads into this in another way. And then I'm going to weigh it down and leave it overnight to make sure everything cures and is stuck and is great. And that's it. That is my art journal page for week 32 of Crafty Hope Prompts. And I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you're going to play along. I can't wait to see how you each use beads if you're using these prompts. Because, beads are one of my loves. So, all right, if you like this, make sure to give me a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. And come back Monday and see what 3 prompts I draw for week 33. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.